Welcome to Dr. Mark's Music Notes. I'm Dr. Mark Runkles, and today we're going to learn about the history of jazz. Jazz was created in America early in the 20th century from two main influences: Western classical music for its harmony, melody, and form, and African rhythms. There is often a heavy emphasis on improvisation. Jazz tunes are essentially theme and variations with the melody, also known as the hid, that opens and closes the piece serving as the theme, and the improvisations by multiple soloists in the middle serving as the variations. We divide jazz into 6 eras, which are early jazz, swing, bebop, cool, hard bop, and free jazz. These eras loosely follow the eras of Western classical music. I'll summarize each era and provide a few key musicians starting with early jazz that developed in New Orleans. Early jazz is often referred to as New Orleans or Dixieland jazz. It was developed in the South by African Americans who would have been descendants of slaves. Early jazz was polyphonic, with the trumpet playing the melody in the middle register, the clarinet playing fast filigree in the upper register, and the trombone sliding around in the lower register. This style of trombone playing became known as the tailgate trombone because the trombone players held their slides over the back of the vehicle's tailgate during parades. The rhythm section in early jazz consisted of piano, bass, and drums. The banjo was often added or replaced the piano. A tuba could replace the bass. Several important early jazz musicians include trumpeter Joe King Oliver, trumpeter and vocalist Louis Armstrong, trumpeter Bix Beiderbecke, saxophonist Frankie Trumbauer, clarinetist and soprano saxophonist Sidney Bechet, and pianist Jelly Roll Morton. These lists are not all-inclusive. I have also included the Preservation Hall Jazz Band on this list. I got to hear them live in Preservation Hall the one time I've been to New Orleans, and they're a great modern example of the early style of jazz. Here's a picture of Louis Armstrong playing his trumpet. Armstrong was the first jazz musician to develop a brilliant and virtuosic style of improvising. His influence as an improviser is felt throughout the history of jazz. During the swing era, jazz became America's popular music. It was primarily dance music. There was a dichotomy between hot bands and sweet bands. Hot bands were made up of mostly black musicians, tended to play highly energetic music, and put more of an emphasis on improvised solos. Sweet bands were made up of mostly white musicians, played in a more saccharine style, and were more popular with the mostly white audiences. The standard was set in this era for large jazz ensembles or big bands. They consisted of 5 saxophones, which were 2 altos, 2 tenors, and 1 baritone, 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, and a rhythm section of piano, guitar, bass, and drums. Multiple saxophonists would also double on clarinet or flute. Duke Ellington and Count Basie were both pianists and led hot swing-era big bands. Clarinetist Benny Goodman was the first bandleader to attempt to combine elements of both the hot and sweet bands. Ellington, Basie, Goodman, and other bandleaders all had a number of important soloists join their bands. There are too many to list here. Tenor saxophonist Coleman Hawkins bridged early jazz with the swing era. As most Dixieland band horn sections consisted of trumpet, clarinet, and trombone, Hawkins was one of the first musicians to make the saxophone a viable jazz instrument as a soloist. Here is a picture of Duke Ellington. Duke was a pianist, but is best known as an outstanding composer, arranger, and band leader. Bebop took jazz away from the realm of popular music because its musicians wanted the audience to listen to their music instead of dancing. Tempos moved away from the danceable middle. Fast tempos got faster, slow tempos got slower. Chord changes became more complex. Soloists had to navigate more chords in a shorter amount of time. Chords themselves were frequently more complicated by including upper extensions that were often altered. Melodies became more angular and less singable. Smaller combos of 3 to 6 musicians dominated the bebop era. This gave soloists more space to improvise than in a large big band. Several important musicians vital to the development of bebop were alto saxophonist Charlie Parker, trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie, pianist Thelonious Monk, tenor saxophonist Dexter Gordon, trombonist J.J. Johnson, and pianist Bud Powell. Here's a picture of alto saxophonist Charlie Parker. Parker's style of improvisation would become an enormous influence upon all jazz saxophonists who came after him.